Hi and welcome to my second tutorial. In the first tutorial, I promised you I would cover relative clauses today. So here we are with relative clauses in my makeshift studio. Okay, so what is a relative clause? Before that, I am sure you would like to know what is a clause. A clause is nothing but a group of words, okay, which has a subject and a predicate, or a subject and a verb. There are two types of clauses, okay. You have an independent clause and you have a dependent clause. When you talk about independent clauses are a group of words that stand by itself. It is a complete sentence. Whereas a dependent clause does not make complete meaning. It is dependent on the independent clause. Okay. So then, after you know what a clause is, what is a relative clause? Now, relative clause is one of the very easy clauses that you can learn. There are very simple methods to identify what a relative clause is. Okay. So let's move on to what a relative clause is. A relative clause is a dependent clause. First thing, a relative clause is a dependent clause. It cannot stand by itself. It does not make complete meaning when it stands by itself. Okay. Let us move on to how to identify a relative clause. Okay. So as I said, relative clauses are very easy to identify. The first thing is there is a subject and a verb, and second, it either begins with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. So it either begins with a relative pronoun like who, which, whom, whose, that, or with a relative adverb like when, where, why. Okay. Now what is the function of a relative clause? What is the purpose of a relative clause? Why do we add a relative clause? Well, a relative clause, the main function is to give information. A relative clause gives information, okay? And there are two types of information that a relative clause gives. Two E's. Now what are these two E's? Let's see. Okay. So we were dealing with the function or the main purpose of a relative clause, and that is, as I said, it gives you information about the subject or the object that we are talking about. Okay. So it gives information. Now information, I said two E's. Okay. The two E's are essential information and extra information. Essential information is the defining clause and extra information is the non-defining clause. Now essential information means it's like the salt that you use in your dish. It is necessary, otherwise it does not make a complete dish. And the extra information is like the pepper, the coriander that you use to make the dish appealing. It is the extra information. It is to add interest or intrigue. Many authors or writers use this extra information to add the flavor to the subject or the object that we are talking about. Let us do some examples, and then I'm sure this part will become very clear to you. Defining clauses, as I said, are essential. They give you essential or important information about the subject or the object. Now, here I have a neighbor. So what? What about the neighbor? The sentence here is complete. I have a neighbor. Yes, but it is not making much sense. I have a neighbor, so what about him? We want to visit a country. Which country? What? There is always a question mark. They live in a house. The sentence is complete. But when you add the defining clause, it gives it much important information which is necessary. The reason is not important. What reason? A giraffe is an animal. Yes. So, now let's complete these with defining clauses. Okay? For example, if I say, I have a neighbor here. I have a neighbor who is a fitness freak. Now, I'm telling you more about the neighbor, which is essential because I have a neighbor does not make much sense. We want to visit a country where we can see the northern lights, for example. They live in a house which probably looks very haunted to me. The reason is not important. The reason why I don't believe in you is not important. A giraffe is an animal which has a very long neck here. So I am providing essential information to make these clauses. Now each clause, as you see, will start with either a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. Okay? So you can complete this. We can complete them in the slide. You will see that I have completed all the defining clauses. And as an exercise, you can just take the first part and you can complete it the way you want to with your essential defining clauses. Okay? So let's move on to non-defining clauses. So after defining clauses, let's turn to non-defining clauses which give you extra information, the interest, the E, the extra one. So let's take the sentence from your text. A letter to God, from that. All morning Lencho, who knew his fields intimately, looked at the sky. So now, the non-defining clause, the relative clause, is who knew his fields intimately, looked at the sky. If you notice, it starts with a relative pronoun who, because we're talking about a person, Lencho. A human being is always referred to as who. So we start who knew his fields intimately, looked at the sky. If you notice that every place, we will do that later, but before a clause and after a clause there is a dash. Either there is a dash or there is a comma which separates the clause. Now if you take the clause away, yet the sentence is totally complete and meaningful. All morning Lencho looked at the sky. What is adding extra information is all morning Lencho, who knew his fields intimately, looked at the sky. Let's take the second sentence again from your text. The woman who was preparing supper replied, yes, God willing. Now the relative clause is easily identified. Starts with a relative pronoun who, again because we are referring to a human being, who was preparing supper, replied, yes, God willing. You take it away and still your sentence is complete. The woman replied, yes, God willing. Now it is telling you something more about what she was doing at that time. And again, as you see, the woman, it starts before the relative clause there is a comma, after the relative clause there is a comma. Now the third one, the house on top of the hill, which has no windows, gives me the creeps. Now here, as it is an inanimate thing, the house, you say which. The house on top of the hill, comma, again you start with the relative pronoun which, has no windows, gives me the creeps. So here, after that, this is the relative pronoun clause. You take it away and your sentence still is complete. The house on top of the hill, that particular house, gives me the creeps. This is adding flavor. Next, my neighbor who goes jogging every morning is a singer by profession. Again, you start with a relative pronoun who, there's a comma before it, there's a comma after it. Who goes jogging every morning is a singer by profession. So my neighbor is a singer by profession, complete. But I'm telling something more about him, that he goes jogging every morning. So that is the extra information. So these are non-defining clauses. Okay. There is something called a hidden clause. So hidden clause is when the who and the verb are not expressed. We'll check what a hidden clause is. Okay. Okay. Hidden clauses. You cannot see them, but they do exist. The house. This is from, again, A Letter to God. Both these examples are from the lesson A Letter to God. The house. The only one in the entire valley sat on the crest of a low hill. Now here, easily identify is your relative clause without a relative pronoun. The relative pronoun implied is the house, which was the only one in the entire valley, sat on the crest of a low hill. But this is not there. It is hidden. So, the relative clause is hidden. There is a dash and it tells you that the house, which was the only one in the entire valley, sat on the crest of a low hill. The second sentence, the postmaster who was, is not given there. It's not necessary. It's hidden. The postmaster who was, but a dash, says, a fat, amiable fellow also broke out laughing. So the postmaster also broke out laughing. The hidden clause is here, a fat, amiable fellow who was. Okay, so these are hidden clauses and you cannot see them, but they do exist and they are identified by a hyphen in front of the clause and after the clause. So these are hidden clauses. Let's turn to some revision work and then I will give you some homework to do. Please do not forget to do your homework. Okay? Yeah. So revision, let's move to some revision. Yeah. A relative clause is a dependent clause, first thing. It gives information. The purpose of a relative clause is to give information, essential or extra information. All relative clauses start with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. Relative pronouns are who, whose, whom, which, that. Relative adverbs when, where, why. And there is always a dash or a comma before and after a non-defined relative clause. I repeat, non-defined relative clause. Okay, so there are some exercises which I request you, a humble request to sit and answer, write them down. If there are any queries, please ask. And in my next tutorial, I am going to touch upon metaphors and similes before we do the poetry. Okay, I want to thank my ex-student Rajay Naik for helping me with my tutorials because I am not a techno-savvy person. And so thank you Rajay, thank you very, very much. Goodbye. We'll check what a hidden clause is. Okay. I need a break.